They came crashing through my front gate at 3:02 a.m., but I was already watching. Most people would have been caught off guard, half asleep, scrambling to make sense of what was going on. Not me. I was wide awake, sitting in my darkened cabin with eyes locked on the screen that showed the live feed from my security cameras. I had a mug of black coffee in one hand and my phone in the other, already dialed to my team on standby. Some call me paranoid. I call it prepared. Because when you've dealt with war zones, led tactical missions, and seen what people are truly capable of, you don't leave anything to chance, not even at a quiet lake cabin deep in the woods. I moved out here to get away from all that, the chaos, the noise, the backstabbing politics. I just wanted peace. Fishing, quiet nights, a breeze off the water. I didn't expect that the real war would come from an HOA. But that's exactly what happened. When I bought the cabin, it was a fixer-upper. Roof was rotting, the dock needed rebuilding, and everything screamed abandoned. But I saw potential. And I didn't need neighbors' approval to live my life. Or so I thought. Within 2 weeks of moving in, I received a letter from the Homeowners Association. It had a logo with an eagle and a lake on it, trying too hard to look official. They welcomed me, then listed 10 violations. I hadn't even unpacked. The mailbox was non-standard. The gravel I laid out temporarily for the driveway was not HOA approved. My utility trailer was unsightly. I laughed at first. But the letters kept coming. Then came the visits. HOA President, Linda Whitmore, showed up one morning, uninvited, clipboard in hand, acting like she was delivering a court order. She said the cabin was under HOA jurisdiction and if I didn't comply with regulations, I'd face legal action. I told her I'd already looked into the HOA boundaries and my property sat just outside their legal zone. She didn't like that. Her fake smile twitched. Well, we can't have one rotten apple spoiling the neighborhood, she said. I smiled back and told her I don't spoil, I defend. That was the beginning of it. What followed was harassment. Drone flyovers. Mysterious complaints filed to the county. One night, someone slashed my tires. Another night, I found a dead raccoon nailed to my porch. That's when I installed the surveillance system. And that's when I started getting really ready. You see, I'm not just some ex-SWAT guy with old stories and medals in a box. I still run training sessions. I still have contacts in law enforcement, private security, and even federal defense circles. Most of my old squad still lives nearby. We keep in touch. We run drills for fun. The kind of people who don't panic under pressure. The kind of people who don't wait for the cops when something smells wrong. Last week, I got a tip from a friend in dispatch. An anonymous caller kept trying to report illegal activity on my property. Same voice, different days. Always late at night. Never left a name. My friend flagged it. She said, "Watch your back. This feels off." That brings us back to 3:02 a.m. A black van with no license plate pulled up to my front gate. 4 men jumped out. Dressed like police officers, but their body language? All wrong. Real cops move with controlled confidence. These guys were jittery, twitchy, trying too hard. One of them carried a battering ram. Another had bolt cutters. No body cams, no name tags. I knew right then, these weren't cops. They were fakes. Possibly hired. Possibly dangerous. I tapped a button on my remote. The external floodlights didn't come on, not yet. I watched through the night vision feed as they cut the lock and pushed through the gate. They didn't notice the thermal drone overhead. They didn't know I was already on the comms with my team, each position just out of view, camouflaged in the woods, ready. I could hear one of them talking. In and out. Boss said just scare him. Trash the place. Make him feel unsafe. Boss? Only one person fit that description. Linda. Apparently, she'd had enough of me ignoring her petty threats. So now, she'd escalated. She thought sending in fake cops would intimidate me. Maybe even get me to leave. What she didn't know, and never could have guessed, is that I don't scare easy. And I never back down from a fight I didn't start. They reached the front door. One of them yelled, "Sheriff's Department. Open up." I didn't answer. My doors reinforced steel behind decorative wood. They didn't know that either. I watched as they tried to ram it open. I let them try. I wanted them halfway inside before I made my move. They got the door about 6 inches open, just enough to wedge themselves in, and that's when I spoke into the mic. Engage. 4 seconds. That's all it took. 2 of my guys moved in from behind, cutting off their escape. Another triggered the flashbang launcher mounted in the entryway ceiling. The intruders screamed, dropping their fake badges and weapons as they hit the ground. One started crying, hands in the air. Another froze, too stunned to speak. I stepped forward. Calm. Controlled. Not angry. Just tired. Tired of being pushed. Tired of fake authority. I asked them, "Who sent you?" Silence. Then one broke. Lady named Linda. HOA president. Said you were threatening the community. I leaned down close, locked eyes, and said, "I am the community. And I protect what's mine." They had no idea the door was custom-built steel reinforced with a hardwood facade. It looked like an old lake cabin entrance, but it was actually a shield. And I wasn't just defending my property, I was defending my peace, my name, and everything I'd earned in life. As I sat in the command room, which used to be a storage closet before I converted it into a mini operation center, I watched them fumble like amateurs. They thought they could just waltz in, scare me, and leave me begging for HOA forgiveness. But they'd just stepped into the last place on earth they should have messed with. One of them gave a fake knock and shouted again, "Search warrant. Step out." But no warrant came. No real uniform. No body cam. Just 4 costumed punks trying to look tough. I knew exactly what kind of operation this was, scare and smash. They were here to destroy my home, rattle me, maybe leave a warning behind like breaking a few windows or tearing up my equipment. But they were doing it under the false pretense of law. And that's a federal offense. That's felony impersonation, conspiracy, and home invasion all wrapped up in a neat little bundle. I took one last look at the monitors and gave the command. Team A, on my mark. Trap zone ready. Engage in 5. Outside, in the woods surrounding my cabin, my guys took position. These weren't your average neighbors, these were brothers I bled with. My former second-in-command, Daniels, was in the east tree line. Knox was on the dock, barely visible under night camo. Ramirez and Chen were crouched behind the garage, eyes on the front. Every one of us had dealt with worse in far more dangerous situations, and yet this felt personal. Because this wasn't just a job, it was my home, and someone had dared bring war to it. At exactly 3:05, the first fake cop tried forcing the door with a shoulder hit. The second followed. The door creaked, but didn't break. I activated the trap. The outer entry hall had been rigged to emit a non-lethal but blinding flash from hidden wall lights triggered by motion in the narrow zone. They were instantly blinded, disoriented, coughing from the small burst of irritant gas released from the top vent. They stumbled backward, but too late. Chen and Ramirez hit the front from the left and right, weapons drawn but safeties on. Knox emerged from the dockside with a high-intensity spotlight, pinning the fourth guy who'd stayed back to watch. He didn't even have time to run. My voice came through the mounted speakers, on the ground. Hands where I can see them. You are being recorded. Stay down and you will not be harmed. It wasn't anger in my voice. It was disappointment. Because I couldn't believe this had actually gone this far, that someone thought they could send fake officers to break into a citizen's home just because they didn't like his curtains or boat color. That someone in power, even petty HOA power, had the audacity to play God. One of them dropped flat immediately. Another hesitated, until Daniel stepped from the trees behind him, weapon ready. All four were zip-tied, disarmed, and seated against the outer wall of the cabin within 60 seconds. Not one shot fired. Not one scratch on them. We're trained for control, not chaos. One of them started babbling. We didn't know you'd be armed, man. We didn't know this was like, serious. I stepped out into the porch light, wearing a vest over my pajamas. I looked them dead in the eye. Tell me who sent you. Silence. I raised my phone. I have everything on video. I have your van on camera, your tools, your words, your faces. You're not walking away tonight. So either you talk to me now, or the real sheriff will get it out of you later. One guy, the youngest, early 20s, couldn't keep his mouth shut, broke. It was the HOA lady. The blonde with the Lexus. She said you were a threat to the neighborhood. Said you were aggressive. That you had weapons. That the cops wouldn't come fast enough if something happened. Said we just needed to scare you into moving out. I felt my blood boil, but I stayed calm. Because that name? That car? That woman? Linda Whitmore. The queen of HOA nonsense. She had finally shown her true colors. I walked back inside and called the real sheriff. I told them I had 4 intruders detained, that they were impersonating officers, and I had video, audio, and witness testimony. The dispatcher already knew who I was, because this wasn't the first time Linda had tried dragging law enforcement into her vendetta. 20 minutes later, 3 squad cars showed up. Lights flashing, real badges on belts. When they saw the scene, 4 fake officers in restraints, video footage showing everything from gate entry to attempted breach, the lead deputy turned to me and said, "You weren't kidding. This is serious." The fake cops were loaded into cruisers. One of them begged me, "Please, man. We didn't mean to hurt you. She just paid us to scare you. We thought this was just some punk homeowner. We didn't know you were." I cut him off. "You didn't care who I was. You were willing to scare an old man alone in the woods just for cash. That's enough to ruin someone's life. You're lucky I'm not pressing charges individually. But Linda? She's finished." The officers promised to open an investigation, and I handed them every second of footage. I knew exactly how this would play out, and Linda had no idea what was coming. The moment I stepped back into the cabin, I didn't feel victory. I felt disappointment, deep in my chest. That someone could take something as peaceful and beautiful as a lake community and poison it with power games. But I also felt calm. Because this wasn't over. This was just the beginning. I didn't just want justice, I wanted the truth out in the open. No more hiding behind neighborhood boards or signatures on fake letters. No more cowards in suits using others to do their dirty work. And the next morning, I knew exactly where I'd be, front row at the HOA meeting. By 10 a.m. the next morning, I was showered, shaved, and seated in the HOA meeting room wearing a clean collared shirt and the same calm expression I used to wear when walking into a hostage negotiation. The difference? This time I was the one holding all the leverage. The HOA held their monthly meetings inside the community center near the lakefront, a cozy little hall with folding chairs, donuts no one touched, and a projector no one really knew how to use properly. But today, everything was different. I wasn't there to argue about grass height or mailbox shapes. I was there to expose a criminal. The room filled up quickly. People whispered when they saw me. Some nodded respectfully, others looked away. They all knew something happened last night. Rumors had already started flying. There were whispers about sirens, flashing lights, and arrests. But no one knew the truth yet. Not until I stood in front of them with a flash drive in one hand and the quiet fury of a man who'd been pushed too far. Linda walked in 10 minutes late, like always. Designer sunglasses, pressed white blouse, and that fake HOA smile like nothing could touch her. She walked straight to the front, acting like she owned the building, ignoring me completely. I didn't say a word. I just waited until she was seated, adjusted the mic, and plugged in my drive. Before we begin today's agenda, I said, I'd like to share something that happened last night. Something every homeowner here has the right to know. Linda stiffened but stayed silent. The room dimmed as I cued the video, starting not with the break-in, but with the aerial footage of the van pulling up to my gate. No plates. 4 men in fake uniforms. Then the audio, just scare him. Trash the place. He's armed, so be quick. Gasps echoed through the room. A woman near the back covered her mouth. One of the board members leaned forward, eyes wide. I let the footage run for exactly 3 minutes, just enough to show the fake cops breaching my gate, approaching the door, then the coordinated takedown. Then I paused it. Silence. Those 4 individuals were not law enforcement. They were hired thugs dressed as officers. They attempted to break into my home at 3:02 a.m. They were intercepted, detained, and arrested. They are currently being held by county authorities and facing felony charges. And they were sent by your HOA president. The room exploded. Voices shouting. Chairs screeching. Linda jumped to her feet, her face drained of color. Lies. This is fabricated. He's manipulating. I have full surveillance footage, I interrupted. I have audio. I have statements. One of the men confessed on-site that you instructed them to intimidate me into leaving. Paid under the table. He described your car, your home, your threats, even your exact words. You can't prove that in court. She barked, but her voice cracked. I don't have to, I said calmly. Because the sheriff already has enough evidence to open a criminal investigation. And I've already filed civil action. You're finished. The board looked stunned. One member, Greg, the treasurer, I think, asked quietly, is this true, Linda? Did you authorize anything like this? Linda's eyes darted. She opened her mouth but nothing came out. She tried to walk out. 2 deputies were already waiting outside. They stepped in, cuffs ready. Ma'am, you're under arrest. You have the right to remain silent. The rest was drowned out by the sound of people murmuring, whispering, and recording it all on their phones. Some were shocked. A few were smug. I just stood still, watching as she was walked out of the same meeting room where she once fined an old man for leaving his fishing pole leaned against a fence. The same room where she threatened to have my cabin condemned for visual disruption. The same room where she laughed when I told her to back off. No one was laughing now. Once she was gone, the meeting didn't resume. People stood around in small groups, asking questions. Some came up to me. We had no idea, one woman said. She said you were dangerous, unstable, even aggressive. That you threatened her. I nodded. She lied. Over and over again. And now she'll answer for it. I didn't stay long. I didn't need to. The message had been delivered. The truth was out. And there was more coming. Over the next few days, more emails surfaced. Members of the board began leaking messages, internal memos from Linda urging them to support assertive community cleansing, which included plans to target my cabin and others who didn't match the HOA vision. Turns out I wasn't the only one she bullied, just the first to fight back with proof. Within a week, the HOA was drowning in legal trouble. Half the board resigned. Residents began protesting the monthly fees, demanding a full financial audit. Turns out the books weren't clean either. HOA funds had been quietly funneled into private security enhancements that didn't exist. All linked to companies owned by Linda's cousin. It was corruption from top to bottom, and no one had noticed because no one questioned her. Until I did. The county issued a full injunction against the HOA's operations. A judge ordered all enforcement activities to cease immediately. Then came the ruling that changed everything. The HOA charter had never legally included my property. It had been manipulated years ago through shady rezoning paperwork signed off by a retired clerk with personal ties to the board. In short, I was never under their authority. They had no right to fine me. No right to harass me. No right to send fake officers to my door. And now? They were being sued not just by me, but by dozens of residents who'd suffered quietly under Linda's regime. Some had lost money. Others had sold their homes just to escape the pressure. It all came out. And the best part? The property that once sat on the HOA border, my cabin, was now officially ruled outside any and all community association control. That meant no fees. No rules. No one else's power trip reaching my porch ever again. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a man who had simply drawn the line and dared someone to cross it. And when they did, they learned the hard way that the quietest man on the lake might be the one most prepared for war. Linda had her courtroom. I had my porch, my dogs, my friends, and peace, finally earned. In the weeks that followed, the lake grew quieter, not just in sound, but in spirit. The tension that once hung over the community like thick fog had lifted, replaced with cautious peace and hesitant hope. The HOA's grip had been broken, and people started to reclaim what they'd lost: freedom. Freedom to plant what they wanted in their yards. Freedom to fix their homes without begging for approvals. Freedom to breathe without fear of fines or threats or late-night letters. And me? I went back to living how I always intended, simply, quietly, with both eyes open. Every morning, I sat on the porch of my lakeside cabin with a hot cup of coffee in one hand and my 2 German shepherds stretched out at my feet. The sun would rise through the trees, lighting up the surface of the lake in a soft orange glow. Some mornings, I fished. Some mornings, I read. But every morning, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: peace. Not just because Linda was behind bars awaiting trial, or because the HOA had been formally dissolved by county order, but because I had done what most people never get the chance, or courage, to do. I stood my ground. I protected what was mine. And I exposed evil hiding behind a fake smile and a neighborhood title. There were still reminders of what happened. A few former board members tried to save face, issuing public apologies. One of them left a letter on my porch, handwritten, admitting he'd stayed silent out of fear. I didn't respond, but I didn't need to. He was already facing lawsuits from other residents, and his name was forever tied to the collapse of the HOA. Linda's trial drew media attention, especially after it was revealed that she had been paying off certain local contractors to act as enforcers for her plans. One of the fake cops took a plea deal and spilled everything. The payments, the plans, even the conversations where Linda had said things like, "Make him feel unsafe," and, "I want him gone, permanently if possible." That line shocked everyone. But not me. I already knew what kind of person she was. And the system did its job. The charges stacked up: conspiracy, impersonation of law enforcement, home invasion, harassment, and misuse of HOA funds. She cried in court. Claimed she was misunderstood. Claimed I had threatened her first. But the evidence, video, audio, witness testimony, was airtight. The judge didn't even blink when he handed down the sentence. She was found guilty and taken straight from the courtroom to a holding cell. She'd be in for years. Justice doesn't always come fast, but when it does, it's beautiful. Back at the lake, neighbors started dropping by, not out of curiosity or gossip, but to say thank you. One old man brought over homemade peach pie. A single mother I'd barely spoken to before hugged me and said, "You gave us our neighborhood back." I never wanted to be a hero. I just wanted to be left alone. But life doesn't always give you what you want, it gives you a choice, surrender or stand. I chose to stand. And now, that stand had helped dozens of people. Kids rode their bikes again without fear of being ticketed. Families hosted backyard BBQs without worrying about noise levels. Even the community garden that Linda once shut down was reopened with volunteers planting fresh vegetables. Peace returned. Not just to me, but to everyone. And through it all, I never lowered my guard. My cameras stayed on. My sensors stayed active. My dogs stayed trained. Not because I was afraid, but because I'd learned something valuable. Safety isn't something you can assume. It's something you protect. I invested in my own safety because I knew the world doesn't always knock, it sometimes breaks the door down. But I also kept a new frame on my mantle. Inside it was a printout of the HOA charter, with a red stamp across it that read "Void." A small reminder that sometimes the system can be beaten. That sometimes the quiet man in the cabin isn't the target, he's the storm. One day, about a month after the incident, I received a letter. This one was from the county. It officially stated that my land had been removed from any overlapping community jurisdiction and now sat as an independent private residence with no attached fees or regulations. I smiled. It was over. Really over. I walked out to the dock, sat at the edge, and let my feet dangle in the water. The lake rippled gently around me. Across the water, I saw kids laughing. Saw families walking. Saw freedom. And as I looked out at the world I had defended, I realized something important. The battle with Linda, the fake cops, the legal mess, it wasn't just about me. It was about standing against bullies hiding behind bureaucracy. It was about reminding people that rules are meant to serve communities, not control them. It was about proving that even in a world where power often corrupts, truth still wins, if someone's willing to fight for it. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't hear engines. I didn't hear shouting. I didn't hear threats. I heard wind. Birds. Water. Peace. My dogs lay beside me, tails wagging. My fishing rod waited nearby. And my cabin, my fortress, stood proud and untouched behind me. They tried to scare me out. They tried to break me. They tried to erase me from a community I legally didn't even belong to. But now? I own more than just a cabin. I own respect. I own my story. And I own every quiet second of this sunrise, earned the hard way, one battle at a time.